let's just not tax Taco Bell. Leave them alone. Maybe they'll take a taco and put it in your burrito. And
That's The Edge of Anarchy with your host Amanda, Monday nights at 9 on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
This is Vigilant Liberty Radio News from Independent Journal Review for January 14th. The Tampa Bay Police Department is investigating after a SWAT team killed a man and an informant later admitted to giving police false information that led to the raid. The man, Jason Westcott, was shot by police officers conducting a no-knock warrant at his home. Westcott, believing his home was being robbed, had grabbed his gun to protect himself. Police initially said the investigation of Westcott began because of neighbor complaints, but when reporters found no neighbors who had called the police and no records of complaints, the police department revised their assertion, saying the case began on a tip from an informant who bought marijuana from Westcott. The raid on Westcott's home did turn up marijuana, but the amount was only approximately $2 worth, and Westcott had no previous criminal record. In his first State of the State address, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey put an education at the front and center of his speech. Governor Ducey proposed the creation of the Arizona Public School Achievement District to provide new ways for more students to have equal access to the state's best-performing charter schools. More room would be made in part by turning over vacant space at district schools to charter and private schools and allowing the state to guarantee construction loan for charter schools, saving millions of dollars in interest payments. Governor Ducey's address also expressed openness to working with the minority Democrats and an attempt to balance the state's budget by freezing state employee hiring, except for public and child safety positions. U.S. taxpayers are paying more than $300 million to the Afghan National Police, but reports indicate a large portion of that money is going to officers who don't actually exist. According to an audit by the Special Investigator General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, the U.S. government continues to pay the overhead for the ANP, but there is no supervision over the allotment of funds. In a previous audit in 2011, the Special Investigator found many weaknesses in the payroll process, including unverified and lacking data. ANP identification cards have been implemented to help combat fraud, but the audit finds there are almost twice as many ID cards in circulation as there are active officers. And other attempts to combat fraud have not been effective either. And the story of Martin Pistorius, who fell ill to a rare and progressive disease while living in South Africa in 1988, is lighting up social media. The disease left Martin in a vegetative state, and doctors said they had run out of options. For 12 years, Martin's parents cared for him at home and with the help of a special care center. What they did not know is that Martin regained some mental consciousness 2 years after he fell ill. Trapped in his body but with a functioning mind, Martin battled depression and used his mental capabilities to regain some control over his life. As his mindset improved, so did his neurological developments, and at age 26, an evaluation determined Martin was able to identify what was going on around him. His mother quit her job and helped Martin regain motor function. Martin, now 39, went on to graduate college with a degree in computer science, started a web company, and wrote a book. He now lives in England with his wife. This has been Amy Curtis with your Vigilant Liberty Radio News from Independent Journal Review for January 14th.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Hi, this is Taylor Millard. Be sure to catch my show, Saturday Night Cigar Lounge, right here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. If you don't, I'll add you to my grudge list. Just ask the Washington Examiner's Ash Scow at Saturday Night Cigar Lounge here on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
And we're back on Liberty Unfiltered. I'm your host, Steve Long, and joining me tonight is the Chief Liberty Officer of Liberty.me, Jeffrey Tucker. Welcome back, Jeff.
Thanks so much.
I thought of something I wanted to ask you. Have you seen on social media this? It just happened a couple days ago. They started doing this these quizzes. Which libertarian celebrity are you?
I saw it. The first time I took it, I did not get myself.
I was going to ask, did you get yourself?
I did not the first time. I had to tweak it a little bit. And it was, I'm not sure what made the difference, but there was one question that said, do you curse? And I said, yes. And it turned out to be Chris Cantwell. And then I changed. So I changed my answer and I said I don't, and then I turned out to be me. So I guess according to the quiz, that's really the only difference between Cantwell and me is
Wow.
Kirsten.
That's interesting. I didn't get you either. I got Judge Knapp. Interestingly enough, my wife got you. So
there's something funny about this whole celebritarian thing. People, they act as if it's like a job listing in a newspaper, and I applied for it and got it. That's actually not what happened at all. I never wanted to be that guy, and I've just been doing my work and doing a lot of speaking, that sort of thing. But at some point, this term came to be affixed to me, and I kind of regret it. But it's essentially there's nothing you can really do about it. I've never really been a public person. I mean, I'm very happy to work in a small closet with no windows, and I could just sit on my laptop all day, and that's what makes me happy. But nowadays, I can't even be in any airport. I have to go to Australia actually to get privacy. And even there, I mean, I flew into Melbourne recently. There's a bunch of people recognize me, so I don't know. It's a little bit funny, and it's a little boring for people to hear the sad tales of a celebrity, such as it is. But it is a little alarming. I mean, it does change your life in many ways.
yeah, imagine. So the next subject that I wanted to talk about tonight was in regards to an article that you wrote last year for the, I want to say it was for the Foundation for Economic Education.
Yeah, you're talking about my humanitarianism versus brutalism.
Yeah, the Against Libertarian Brutalism, which seems to have caused... well, I don't really know if it was any kind of controversy, but it was a controversy. I try to write something every day, and it's true that article took me 2 or 3 days to kind of think through entirely, but it was kind of exciting for me because something had bothered me a little bit about a tendency I had observed in libertarianism to be excessively reductionist, as if the long history of liberty and its social and cultural and historical context didn't really matter much, that you could really just and should reduce the idea of liberty to just a 1 or 2 tiny points of strict political doctrine, and that it's wrong to extend it beyond that. To have higher aspirations for, the beautification of society or the liberation of humanity or the empowerment of people or whatever. Any kind of positive vision is sort of ruled out in this tendency that it's just don't tread on me, and it doesn't go any further than that. And the problem with that is that it doesn't establish very good parameters for what constitutes a kind of a longing that's compatible with the liberal tradition broadly considered, by which I mean going all the way back to the High Middle Ages. And when I discovered this architectural school, post-war, really, I found a rough analogy there. It's an architectural school that wanted to build buildings that were purely functional and opposed beautification, emendation, and elaboration as a matter of principled aesthetics and ethics. And I thought, there's a tendency of that same thing within the libertarian world. And the reason I knew it so well and I drew such a vivid picture is that I was able to look inside myself and see that there have been times in my own understanding of what liberty is where I kind of gravitated toward an excessively reductionist view myself. So I began to reflect on the writings of the great libertarians like Bastiat and Mises and my old friend Murray. And what I saw was a broad vision and an aspiration for what society was capable of becoming under conditions of liberty. And there seemed to be a kind of an ethos that was aspirational there. That's missing in an overly reductionist view of libertarianism. So I kind of decided to play a little mental game and a little intellectual game,
and developed these two archetypes: one, a humanitarian, aspirational kind of libertarianism; the other, a brutalist libertarianism, by analogy to the architectural school. So that's what the article laid out and presented, and it completely shocked me just how viral that article became. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, the fact that you're asking me about it now, basically a year later, is kind of interesting, because I probably have written, since then, probably close, to 300 articles.
You mentioned just a few minutes ago. You mentioned Christopher Cantwell.
Yes,
he actually wrote an article about your article, and one of the points he made is it seems like he's claimed that you were flirting with leftism. Yeah,
I don't know what that means really. I wish I knew what that means so that I could figure out if it's true. I think and Chris isn't alone in this. So it's part of the strange aspect of brutalism that I still don't entirely understand, is that like Chris Cantwell definitely has a cultural agenda of his own, and it's and if you can judge based on his, because after I wrote my article, then all this brutalist movement popped up, and one of the failings of my piece is that I gave the really cool name to the people I was opposing and the slightly lame name to the people I was favoring. So suddenly there emerged this brutalist movement. I'm a brutalist. And but I mean, these brutalist groups, and it was totally expected. It wasn't a shock to me. They immediately became misogynistic and racially tinged, and in many cases anti-Semitic, and all this sort of ugly side of humanity.
It's kind of liberty for me, but not for thee.
Right, it's something like that. Yeah, it's very, very strange, and it's like, and also just sort of a little bit attached to sort of taboo breaking for its own sake, and and I don't know, and it's tiresome, really, and that sort of angry hysteria, defying. I'm all for defying civic conventions. I think that's great. But to be outright mean and nasty and malevolent is probably, let's just say there's a tension between things like racism, misogyny, and anti-Semitism, and the liberal tradition. That's all. And that I don't think that is leftism.
Well, a lot of the criticisms that I've seen against that article all seem to be somewhat focused on a specific paragraph in that article.
Oh yeah, which is that the one about?
It's the one where you describe the town that is taken over by fundamentalists,
right,
and exclude certain people based on arbitrary reasons.
Right.
But everyone who lives there is there voluntarily.
Yeah. That's fascinating. That you're right. That I've seen a lot of criticism, because you're reading the article and you're kind of going along and you're like, well, this is interesting, this is fascinating, it's a good theory, but how does it apply? And then finally, I get to an actual application, and it's sort of very vividly drawn, and then people recoiled at that paragraph, and I think in some ways, I recently read the article, and I must say I was extremely pleased with it. I thought it was a very very good piece, and I was very happy with it. That paragraph is probably the weakest aspect of the entire article in some ways, and I feel like I didn't connect it well enough to the rest of the...
I got to be frank that the first time I read it, it kind of left me with a question. And interestingly enough, the question that I had is what seems to be the main concern over these people that are criticizing that paragraph, is that this type of society would of course be defended by the brutalist, But the question is, how would, if you want to call it a humanitarian libertarian, how would they handle a society like this? I mean, I guess the question is, it gets down to whether or not, if you're a humanitarian libertarian,
right,
are you going to use the state to try to correct the society?
Yeah.
And that is
a very valid.
Correct a society like that?